Maya followed Administrator Vexlar through the Academy's grand atrium, where crystalline light filters created rainbow patterns across the polished stone floor. The administrator's secondary appendages twitched nervously as he gestured toward the various academic wings. "The environmental controls in your quarters have been adjusted," Vexlar explained, his translucent skin flushing a concerned violet. "We've increased the gravity generators to 90% Earth standard, though our medical team strongly advised against full replication of your homeworld conditions." Maya smiled politely. "I appreciate the consideration, but Earth gravity won't be an issue. I prefer standard settings, no need for special accommodations." The administrator's eye stalks widened in alarm. "Ms. Rodriguez, perhaps you misunderstand. Proxima Station maintains gravity at approximately 0.4 of your Earth units to accommodate the physiological needs of 17 member species." "I understand perfectly," Maya replied, casually adjusting the strap of her duffel bag. "But adapting to your environment would be valuable for my research. Maintaining separate conditions would defeat the purpose of cultural exchange." A small crowd of students had gathered at a safe distance, their various sensory organs focused intently on the human. A hovering translator drone amplified their whispered conversations. "Respiratory system processes nitrogen-oxygen mixtures. Skeletal structure evolved under crushing gravitational forces. Capable of consuming substances with phase values that would dissolve Merlonian digestive tracts." Maya pretended not to notice the commentary as Vexlar guided her through security protocols. The scanner flashed crimson warnings when she passed through. "Apologies for the inconvenience," said the security officer, a multi-limbed being with iridescent scales. "The system registers several anomalies in your biological composition." "Such as?" Maya asked. "Unusually high bone density, concerning muscle mass, and are those filaments in your mouth natural structures?" "You mean my teeth?" "Yes, completely natural. Humans use them for processing food." The security officer visibly shuddered. "Processing? Inside the oral cavity? Without external enzymes?" Before Maya could respond, Professor Telleran approached, his gelatinous form pulsing with academic curiosity. "Fascinating. Earth mammals retain primitive mastication adaptations. Tell me, do you also possess the regenerative capabilities documented in your species' medical records?" "If you mean healing from cuts and broken bones, yes, standard human biology." The professor's translucent body rippled with excitement. "Extraordinary. Most civilized species lost such regenerative features millions of years ago as their environments became controlled. To actively repair damaged tissue without medical intervention, we must document this thoroughly." Maya stifled a yawn, the long journey catching up with her. This simple action caused several nearby students to back away hastily. "A threat display?" whispered one wide-eyed Procyon student. "Oxygen intake behavior," corrected another. "Their blood requires constant replenishment of oxidizing elements." Administrator Vexlar guided Maya away from the growing crowd. "Perhaps we should continue to your quarters. Tomorrow's orientation includes a comprehensive medical evaluation, purely voluntary, of course, but highly recommended for baseline safety protocols." As they entered the residential wing, Maya noticed the reinforced structural supports around her assigned room. The door, significantly thicker than others in the corridor, featured emergency override panels and atmosphere containment fields. "Standard accommodation?" she asked with raised eyebrows. Vexlar's skin flushed a deeper purple. "With minor security modifications. The Academy Council felt certain precautions were advisable until species compatibility assessments are complete." Maya nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. To these beings, she wasn't just a foreign exchange student. She was an evolutionary anomaly whose very biology represented survival against conditions they considered apocalyptic. "I understand," she said, setting down her bag. "I promise not to accidentally crush any of my classmates or consume inappropriate materials." The administrator couldn't tell if she was joking, which only intensified his nervous color fluctuations as he backed toward the door. The xenobiology laboratory fell silent as Maya casually lifted an equipment case that 3 Proximate assistants had struggled with earlier. Professor Telleran's sensor fronds quivered with excitement as he recorded the event for his ongoing research paper, Deathworld Physiological Adaptations and Their Implications for Evolutionary Theory. Ms. Rodriguez, Zix burbled through his translation device, multiple tentacles gesturing toward the specimen they were examining. Would the alkaline compounds in this solution irritate your epidermis? Maya glanced at the beaker containing a bright purple liquid. Probably. Why do you ask? Because you just placed your unprotected digit into it to retrieve the fallen scalpel. Maya looked down at her hand and quickly wiped the solution off with a nearby cloth. Oh, I didn't notice. It's just mildly caustic to human skin. The classroom erupted in concerned murmurs. The solution, used to dissolve protective exoskeletons during dissection procedures, registered at chemical aggressiveness levels that would melt through standard laboratory equipment without proper containment fields. Just mildly caustic, repeated Professor Telleran, his voice modulator shifting to academic recording mode. Subject demonstrates remarkable resistance to level 3 corrosives with minimal protective countermeasures. Observe the lack of tissue degradation or pain response. Maya sighed as classmates leaned forward to examine her hand. It's really not that impressive. Earth has plenty of natural substances with similar properties. Our skin evolved accordingly. During the midday nutrition break, Maya unpacked her lunch in the communal dining area. The customized meal station had prepared what the culinary algorithm determined to be appropriate human sustenance, a bland protein paste with carefully measured micronutrients. Maya ignored it, instead retrieving a sandwich from her personal container. Is that processed vegetation combined with necrotic animal tissue? Asked Alara, the Arcturian historian who had become Maya's first real friend at the academy. It's called a sandwich. Maya explained, taking a bite. Bread, lettuce, tomato, and yes, what you'd call animal protein. Alara's feathered crest flattened against her skull in fascination. You consume both flora and fauna simultaneously. Such dietary flexibility is extremely rare among evolved species. From across the dining hall, senior xenobiologist Dr. Krevnar observed the exchange with growing interest. He approached their table with measured steps, recording device activated. Ms. Rodriguez, if I may inquire, is it accurate that humans regularly ingest capsaicin compounds as a flavor enhancement rather than recognizing them as defensive neurotoxins? Maya smiled, retrieving a small red bottle from her meal container. You mean hot sauce? Would you like to try some? The resulting demonstration became instantly legendary throughout the academy. Dr. Krevnar's exposure to a single drop of Tabasco, diluted 10 times beyond human consumption standards, triggered an emergency decontamination protocol and 3 hours in the medical bay. The incident prompted a station-wide safety bulletin regarding Earth consumables and their potential classification as controlled substances. That evening, Maya found a small crowd gathered outside the gymnasium observation window. Inside, she performed what she considered a basic exercise routine, alternating cardiovascular training with resistance exercises using the facility's adaptive equipment. To her audience, the display resembled nothing less than training protocols designed for elite military units on combat-oriented worlds. The sustained exertion would trigger respiratory failure in most oxygen-dependent species, whispered a multiple-eyed physiologist to his colleagues. Yet she maintains conversation throughout. Note the controlled micro-damage to muscle tissues, added another observer. Their species intentionally creates cellular trauma to promote enhanced regeneration. Remarkable evolutionary strategy. Maya completed her final set of pull-ups, aware of but trying to ignore her audience. When she exited the facility, Elara waited with a data tablet displaying an incoming transmission. The Advanced Sciences Committee requests your participation in tomorrow's symposium, the Arcturian explained. They're revising several fundamental principles regarding environmental adaptation limits, and your existence has prompted significant academic debate. The extremist challenge control room hummed with activity as technicians calibrated monitoring equipment. Chief Simulation Officer Crean adjusted holographic displays showing the chamber's current configuration, a barren landscape with razor-sharp silicon formations and atmosphere tinged with methane compounds. We've modified certain parameters, Administrator Vexlar informed Maya, mandibles clicking with concern. The standard gravitational fluctuations have been reduced to accommodate your species' limitations. Maya reviewed the simulation specifications on the data tablet. You set gravity variations between 0.8 and 3.2 Earth standard. Yes, we determined that range should remain within tolerable limits for your physiology. Those are the reduced settings, Maya asked, eyebrows raised. Professor Telleran floated forward, his gelatinous form rippling with academic excitement. Most participant species evolved in gravitational fields between 0.3 and 0.7 of your Earth units. The simulation's standard parameters would crush your internal organs, fascinating as that would be to document. Maya suppressed a smile. I appreciate the consideration, but you can restore standard parameters. Earth gravity averages at 1 unit, but many regions exceed that. Mountain climbers regularly function at both lower atmospheric pressure and higher relative gravitational force. The control room fell silent as technicians exchanged concerned glances. Security Chief Calderon's exoskeleton clicked nervously as he approached. Ms. Rodriguez, perhaps I should clarify the nature of this assessment, he said, compound eyes fixed on Maya's face. The extremist challenge simulates survival scenarios from 17 different planetary classifications. Participants aren't expected to complete all segments, merely to demonstrate appropriate emergency responses before requesting extraction. I understand, Maya replied, securing her monitoring bracelet. On Earth, we call these stress tests. They're common in military and emergency response training. The security chief's mandibles quivered. You have civilian emergency protocols that simulate planetary-scale disasters. Before Maya could respond, a chime indicated the previous participant had completed their attempt. Medical drones escorted a visibly distressed Centaurian student from the chamber, their tentacular respiratory appendages pulsing erratically as atmosphere stabilizers administered calming compounds. 32 minutes, announced Chief Simulation Officer Crean. Subjects successfully navigated 2 environmental zones before requesting extraction. Preliminary score places them in the 73rd percentile. Maya stepped toward the chamber entrance as final calibrations completed. The assembled faculty watched with a mixture of scientific curiosity and grim anticipation. From the observation gallery, Maya noticed Alara giving her an encouraging gesture with elegantly feathered appendages. Simulation parameters locked, announced a technician. Environmental hazards scaled to documented human physiological limits based on Terran medical database. Maya checked her minimal equipment. Standard exosuit with basic sensors, emergency beacon, water container, and sample collection tools. Several staff members had strongly recommended additional protective gear, enhanced filtration systems, gravitational compensators, thermal regulators, but Maya had declined most options, preferring mobility over protection. Commencing countdown, stated the automated system. Simulation begins in 10 standard units. Administrator Vexlar approached for a final inspection. The emergency extraction protocol activates immediately upon verbal command or if your vital signs indicate severe distress. There is no shame in early withdrawal. Merely reaching the 2nd environmental zone would place you among the highest-scoring first-attempt participants. Maya nodded respectfully. I'll keep that in mind. The chamber doors slid open, revealing the shimmering energy field that contained the simulation environment. Beyond it, sensors detected swirling dust particles, atmospheric toxins, and temperature readings that fluctuated between extremes that would damage most technological systems. Beginning Extremist Challenge, announced the system. Participant, Rodriguez Maya. Species, human. Homeworld, Earth. Classification, Deathworld, extreme hazard. Maya stepped through the energy field as murmurs of concern echoed behind her. The doors sealed with a decisive hiss, and the observation screens activated, displaying her vital signs alongside environmental readings that already exceeded safety protocols for 14-member species. The control room fell into stunned silence as Maya navigated the high-gravity zone with methodical efficiency. Her vitals displayed on the main monitor showed elevated heart rate and respiration, but remained well within parameters the medical team had established as concerning but not immediately life-threatening for human physiology. "She's running?" Professor Nixaran's voice modulator pitched higher in disbelief. The gravitational force exceeds 3 times her homeworld standard. Chief Medical Officer Preltex consulted her data screens. Fascinating adaptation strategy. She's modified her gait to maximize momentum conservation while minimizing muscular strain. The technique resembles movement patterns documented in primitive Earth pursuit predators. Maya's progress through the storm-lashed terrain had attracted a growing audience. Junior faculty members abandoned scheduled lectures as word spread through the Academy's communication network. The observation gallery reached maximum capacity within 20 minutes of her entry into the simulation. "Entering toxic atmosphere zone," announced the automated system. Ambient chemical composition includes sulfur compounds, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter at levels exceeding safety thresholds for all registered sentient species. On screen, Maya paused briefly to adjust her respirator settings. The basic filtration system she'd selected wasn't designed for prolonged exposure to such conditions, but she seemed unconcerned as she methodically collected the required samples from crystal formations jutting through the poisonous mist. Her pulmonary efficiency defies conventional biological models, noted Professor Talleyrand, recording devices capturing every moment. Observe how she modulates her breathing pattern to minimize exposure while maintaining optimal oxygen absorption. Security Chief Caldern watched with professional assessment in his compound eyes. The human employs tactical movement patterns consistent with hostile environment training. Note the constant situational awareness, strategic use of terrain features for shelter, and efficient energy conservation. In the environmental control section, technicians huddled around monitoring stations with growing concern. The simulation's difficulty scaling algorithms had entered unprecedented territory, continuously adjusting hazard levels upward as Maya's performance exceeded programmed expectations. "We're approaching system limitations," warned Chief Simulation Officer Crean. The challenge parameters were never designed to accommodate this level of capability. The predictive modeling is attempting to establish appropriate difficulty thresholds, but we have insufficient baseline data for human performance metrics. Administrator Vexlar's exoskeleton clicked nervously. "Should we terminate the simulation?" "Unnecessary," responded Professor Nixaran. "The human shows no signs of distress. This represents an unprecedented research opportunity." On the main display, Maya encountered the structural collapse scenario, a maze of precariously balanced debris designed to test problem-solving under extreme pressure, both literal and figurative. The standard approach required participants to carefully disassemble the structure using provided tools while monitoring stress points in the overhead components. Maya studied the situation briefly, then employed a completely unexpected strategy. Rather than attempting to dismantle the obstacle, she identified a load-bearing column, braced her body against it, and physically supported the weight of the collapsing section while simultaneously creating a passageway. "Impossible," whispered a structural engineering professor, all 4 appendages gesturing in disbelief. "The mass distribution analysis indicates forces exceeding." "Checking sensor calibration," interrupted a technician, certain the readings must be erroneous. Sensors functioning correctly confirmed the system. Subject is employing biological leverage advantage combined with homeworld evolved muscular efficiency. Maya completed the navigational equations display on the chamber wall while still supporting the structural element, solving complex spatial calculations without apparent difficulty despite the physical strain. When she released the support beam and moved through the passage she'd created, the entire control room erupted in academic debate. This fundamentally alters our understanding of evolutionary adaptation parameters, declared Professor Telleran, his gelatinous form practically vibrating with excitement. A species that can simultaneously perform complex cognitive functions while under extreme physical duress represents an entirely new classification of sentient development. The temperature alerts flashed across monitoring stations as the simulation cycled between temperature extremes at an accelerated rate. Frost crystallized along simulated rock formations, only to melt minutes later as thermal indicators climbed beyond safety thresholds. The control room's primary display tracked Maya's core temperature with a pulsing indicator that remained stubbornly stable despite environmental fluctuations. Thermal regulation efficiency exceeds predicted metrics, reported the medical observer, a Valaxian physiologist whose own species maintained body temperature through complex chemical processes. Her biological system appears to employ multiple complementary mechanisms simultaneously. Security Chief Calder nervously adjusted his mandible guards. The human has been in the simulation for 73 standard units. No previous participant has exceeded 60 without requiring extraction. A collective gasp rippled through the observation gallery as Maya entered the aquatic challenge zone. The chamber floor opened to reveal a dark expanse of pressurized liquid environment with visible current distortions and temperature gradients designed to disorient participants. Surely she'll request extraction now, Administrator Vexler murmured. Submersion in non-native fluid environments triggers panic responses in 97% of oxygen-breathing species. On screen, Maya approached the water's edge with methodical assessment. She secured her equipment, performed a series of stretching movements that fascinated the xenophysiologists present, then made several adjustments to her exosuit seals. Subject should be notified that aquatic navigation is not mandatory, suggested a concerned faculty member. Most participants choose alternate routes when confronted with immersion challenges. Before anyone could transmit this information, Maya dove cleanly into the water with a technique that prompted immediate analysis by the Academy's Fluid Dynamics Department. Unlike the thrashing panic exhibited by most land-evolved species, her entry barely disturbed the surface tension. Monitoring systems confirm respiratory adaptation, announced the medical observer, surprise evident in their harmonics. She's voluntarily suppressing her breathing response and appears to be conserving oxygen through controlled metabolic regulation. Professor Telleran's recording appendages whirred with excitement. Remarkable. Her species evolved on a world that is 70% covered by water. This suggests aquatic adaptation periods in their evolutionary history, perhaps explaining their unusual respiratory efficiency. Beneath the surface, Maya navigated through powerful currents that would have immediately disoriented most participants. Her movements displayed an intuitive understanding of fluid dynamics, using the water's momentum rather than fighting against it. When she encountered a section of near-freezing temperatures, her technique shifted to minimize exposed surface area. The decreased temperature should trigger immediate thermal shock, noted Chief Medical Officer Preltex with professional concern. Yet her vital signs indicate managed stress rather than system failure. The underwater segment contains several puzzle elements requiring participants to locate and retrieve sample objects while managing diminishing oxygen reserves. Most species relied on technological assistance to extend their submersion time. Maya, however, employed a technique that the monitoring system identified as controlled hypoxic conditioning, deliberately working with limited oxygen to maximize efficiency. I've reviewed Earth training records. offered Alara from her observation position. Their military and exploration personnel routinely practice underwater operations. They call it free diving and consider it recreational in non-professional contexts. This information caused such consternation that 3 faculty members immediately accessed the Academy's database to verify the claim. The concept that any species would voluntarily subject themselves to oxygen deprivation as leisure activity contradicted fundamental assumptions about survival instincts. Maya surfaced at the far end of the aquatic chamber, collecting the final sample with 30% of the expected completion time remaining. As she climbed onto the platform, environmental sensors detected a significant pressure anomaly forming in the simulation system's hydraulic controls. Warning indicators flashed across the control room's main console as the simulation's ancient subsystems struggled against conflicting commands. The temperature regulation units fought to maintain programmed parameters while pressure anomalies spread through hydraulic systems supporting the aquatic chamber walls. System integrity compromised, announced the automated safety protocol. Detecting cascading failures in primary containment grid. Emergency shutdown initiated. Chief Simulation Officer Kreen's appendages flew across the control interface. Shutdown sequence rejected. The system's adaptive difficulty protocols have overridden safety parameters. Impossible. Administrator Vexlar's voice modulator crackled with alarm. The safety systems operate on independent circuits specifically to prevent this scenario. The simulation was never designed to accommodate performance metrics this far beyond standard deviation, explained a senior technician. The challenge algorithm is attempting to maintain appropriate difficulty scaling by accessing restricted system reserves. Security Chief Caldern slammed an emergency override command into the console. Extraction Protocol Alpha, immediate participant retrieval. The command registered, indicators briefly flashed green, then returned to critical red. On the main display, Maya's vital signs showed elevated stress markers as she became aware of the environment destabilizing around her. The aquatic chamber's containment fields flickered ominously as water temperature plummeted toward freezing, while pressure indicators climbed beyond safe thresholds. "We're experiencing a catastrophic feedback loop," reported Professor Nick Saran, analyzing the system diagnostics. "The difficulty calibration systems are interpreting our override attempts as challenge parameters to be overcome." In the observation gallery, faculty members rushed toward emergency exits as station-wide evacuation protocols activated. Alara remained at her post, monitoring communication channels linked to Maya's exosuit. Temperature approaching -15 degrees in standard units, Chief Medical Officer Preltex reported. Pressure equivalent to 4,000-meter ocean depth on Earth. These conditions exceed survivability metrics for all documented species, including theoretical models for extremophile evolution. Inside the chamber, Maya recognized the system malfunction for what it was. Rather than panic, she methodically assessed her surroundings, searching for physical indicators of system architecture. The simulation's rising water levels had revealed seams in the chamber walls that would normally remain hidden, maintenance access points designed for technicians during between-cycle servicing. "She's moving with purpose," observed Security Chief Caldern. "Not random survival instinct, but methodical assessment." Maya located a recessed panel partially exposed by the malfunctioning environmental systems. Using her sampling tools in ways their designers never intended, she pried open the maintenance access to reveal the chamber's underlying control mechanisms. "Is she attempting to hack our systems?" Administrator Vexlar asked incredulously. "Not hacking," corrected Professor Teleran, recording every moment. "She's applying practical engineering principles to create an emergency pressure equilibrium bypass. The approach resembles techniques documented in Earth submarine emergency protocols. Using components from her damaged exosuit and improvised tools, Maya constructed a crude but effective pressure regulation system. She connected hydraulic bypasses to reroute the building pressure while simultaneously creating an insulated pocket of warmer water around her immediate area. Impossible, whispered an engineering professor. The calculations required to balance those pressure differentials would take our most advanced systems several minutes to process, yet she's making adjustments in real time based on tactile feedback. As the chamber's primary containment systems reached critical failure points, Maya's improvised solution created a stable zone within the catastrophic environment. Rather than simply surviving, she was actively counteracting the system malfunction using principles that combined basic physics with intuitive problem-solving. Her current actions don't match any emergency protocol in our database, noted Chief Medical Officer Prevails with growing respect. She's innovating survival strategies using basic scientific principles under conditions of extreme duress. The Academy's emergency response team arrived at the simulation chamber in full hazard gear, prepared for catastrophic conditions. The team leader, a veteran draconian with specialized training in extreme environment rescue, halted abruptly at the chamber entrance. Instead of the expected scene of destruction, they found Maya methodically collecting the final required specimens while simultaneously monitoring the makeshift pressure regulation system she had constructed. "Status report," demanded the team leader through their sealed helmet. Maya glanced up, looking surprisingly composed despite her damaged exosuit and the environmental readings that still flashed critical warnings on nearby displays. Hydraulic systems stabilized through manual bypass. "I've rerouted the primary pressure valves to prevent further buildup. The temperature regulation should reset automatically once pressure normalizes." The response team exchanged confused glances, their specialized equipment detecting environmental conditions that should have rendered any oxygen-dependent life form unconscious, at minimum. Chief Medical Officer Prevails pushed through the gathered responders, medical scanners already active. "Your core temperature registered at near hypothermic levels for 7 minutes. How are you maintaining cellular function?" Maya shrugged as she secured her collected samples. "Cold water immersion is part of standard survival training on Earth. The body shunts blood to vital organs and slows metabolism to conserve energy. It's uncomfortable but manageable for short periods." "Uncomfortable," repeated Prevails incredulously, reviewing biometric data that indicated Maya had experienced conditions comparable to the deepest ocean trenches on her homeworld. "You should be experiencing catastrophic barotrauma, cellular rupture, and systemic organ failure." The pressure was challenging, Maya acknowledged, but not entirely unlike deep water rescue scenarios. "We train for rapid pressure changes through controlled breathing techniques and gradual equalization." Administrator Vexlar arrived with Security Chief Caldern, both moving cautiously as environmental systems continued emergency stabilization procedures. "The system malfunction exceeded all projected failure scenarios," Vexlar explained. "The Academy Council extends profound apologies for the equipment failure." Maya nodded, seemingly unconcerned by her near-death experience. "No permanent harm done. Your simulation has impressive fidelity. The pressure differentials felt remarkably authentic." Caldern's compound eyes fixed on the improvised mechanical bypass Maya had constructed from damaged equipment parts. "You repurposed emergency suit components to create a functional pressure equilibrium system," he observed. "Such engineering adaptations typically require specialized training." "Basic physics," Maya replied. "Water pressure operates predictably regardless of the specific environment. The principles taught in standard Earth engineering courses apply universally." Professor Telleran floated forward, recording appendages still active despite the emergency. "You're suggesting that knowledge considered advanced theoretical physics in 17-member species is taught to juvenile humans as fundamental education." "Not all humans," Maya clarified, "but anyone pursuing engineering or physical sciences would understand basic pressure mechanics and thermodynamic principles." The gathered faculty fell silent, struggling to integrate this information with their understanding of evolutionary development patterns. The Academy's most fundamental assumptions about cognitive specialization versus physical adaptation were being challenged by a single exchange student from a previously marginalized world. The Symposium Committee requests immediate access to your biometric data, announced Professor Nixaran, arriving breathlessly. Your performance has rendered our existing classification systems obsolete. Maya wiped water from her face with casual indifference to the academic revolution unfolding around her. Happy to help, but I should probably change into dry clothes first. As the emergency response team escorted Maya from the chamber, the Academy's senior xenobiologists huddled together in intense discussion. Their gestures became increasingly animated as they attempted to reconcile observed evidence with established theory. The simulation's data recordings, showing a supposedly primitive Deathworlder calmly engineering solutions to catastrophic environmental conditions while maintaining cognitive function, would require comprehensive reevaluation of galactic understanding regarding evolutionary adaptation pathways. 2 standard cycles after the simulation incident, the Academy's Great Hall reached maximum capacity for the first time in its 300-year history. Scholars from 17 member worlds crowded the tiered seating, environmental accommodation pods humming as they maintained appropriate conditions for diverse physiologies. At the center stage, Maya stood beside Administrator Vexlar as he activated the ceremonial recognition protocols. The Academy Council has approved an unprecedented classification amendment. Vexlar announced, his exoskeleton polished to formal gleam. Earth is hereby recategorized from extreme hazard evolutionary anomaly to advanced adaptation paradigm world, with all associated research privileges and academic standing. The assembled scholars erupted in harmonic discussion, translation systems struggling to process the overlapping conversations. Maya accepted the formal documentation with appropriate gravity, though she found the entire proceedings somewhat excessive for what she considered basic survival competence. "We've analyzed your hydration system," Professor Telleran informed her after the ceremony, floating excitedly beside her. "Its elegant efficiency defies our conventional engineering approach. Our preliminary attempts to replicate it have already improved emergency equipment efficiency by 27%. Maya nodded politely. "It's just a modified version of systems used by Earth desert nomads for centuries. Nothing particularly advanced about it." This casual dismissal of innovation that the Academy's engineering department considered revolutionary perfectly encapsulated the perspective shift occurring throughout the station. In the days following the simulation, Maya had found herself surrounded by eager researchers requesting insights into everything from her respiratory adaptations to her problem-solving methodology. Security Chief Cauldron approached with formal precision, mandibles aligned in the gesture of professional respect rarely extended to non-military personnel. "The station's emergency response protocols have been revised based on your performance metrics," he informed her. "I would appreciate your assistance in developing training scenarios that incorporate human adaptive strategies." "Happy to help," Maya replied. "Though you might want to consult Earth's emergency services archives, they have centuries of documented approaches to environmental crisis." In the far corner of the reception hall, a group of students who had once maintained nervous distance now clustered around Alara as she described her observations during the simulation crisis. The Arcturian historian had become something of a celebrity by association, fielding endless questions about human cultural practices that might explain their unexpected capabilities. Their educational approach emphasizes practical application alongside theoretical knowledge, Alara explained to her rapt audience. Maya describes it as learning by doing rather than pure information absorption. The most significant transformation, however, came from the Galactic Council's educational division. Their representatives had arrived 3 days after the incident, reviewing all data before authorizing an expanded exchange program that would bring 50 human students to various specialized academies throughout Confederated space. Your species offers invaluable perspective on adaptation strategies, the council representative explained to Maya during their private meeting, particularly regarding the integration of theoretical knowledge with practical application under stress conditions. As the reception concluded, Maya found a quiet moment to update her personal log transmission scheduled for relay to Earth. She described the academic excitement with amused detachment, explaining how her morning exercise routine now attracted an audience of fascinated xenophysiologists documenting what they termed multiplanar muscular efficiency optimization, but what she simply considered basic stretching. The final section of her transmission contained her most significant observation. Beneath the initial fear and subsequent scientific fascination, she had discovered genuine connection. Species that evolved under radically different conditions could still find common ground in curiosity, adaptation, and mutual respect. What began as an awkward cultural exchange had transformed into something far more valuable: the recognition that different evolutionary paths could lead to complementary strengths rather than insurmountable differences.